Andrea gets the chocolate fish if I had one. If folk would like to come around the table, squeeze up, that would be really good. Thanks. I like to have everybody at the table. So, Andrew, they're not listening. You can go and discipline them. Yes, thank you. You come on up, Nicole. There's room for everybody. Sam, I think we can squeeze you in. Sit beside Nigel there. We'll get it going. Right, thank you, folk, and I actually owe everybody an apology for a slight delay. As is classic when we sort of climb into the new year, not allowed to talk about it's the new year. Amazing number of people that are trying to get things done first thing on a Monday morning. So actually that's starting with the apologies, so my apologies for lateness. We've got a full muster here, well done. I don't think do we have any apologies? No? We're going to try and run through this at a reasonable pace as always. Anybody, hopefully you can stay for the morning, and I suspect that we'll have to finish by 2, given I've got a commitment at 2, if not before. So I might have to renege on that commitment. We'll see how we go. No apologies. Is there any urgent matter that we need to bring up? Stephen, Nigel, we're okay? Nothing that we need to raise? Cracker. Or matters of a minor nature. That's cool. Any matter coming up that needs people to note their interests? No, that's good. We'll continue. We got the minutes of our meeting on the 17th of December. I'll move from the chair. We take them as true and correct. I have a seconder. Thank you, Nigel. Is there any discussion, or rather, is there any matters of correction or accuracy you need to note? You were there when it says you were there and not, etc. We were all okay. I think, Peter, you an apology last time around, which is no big drama. It's all good. I don't think there is anything there that looked like I needed to worry about bring up actions or whatever. I think they are all covered either by our meeting in June or else they're on this agenda. So well done, guys, for keeping track of what we say and agree in minutes, because there's a fair bit of suggestions from the chair last time, probably too many. Okay, in that case, I'll put the motion that we take these as a true and correct record. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. That was a very low volume aye for the first part of the meeting. I hope it gets louder as I go on. So the first substantive item is the audit work program. Thanks, Narayan or Stephen. In your hands, please.
Through you, the Chair, Audit and Risk Committee work program. The proposed ARC work program for 2024-2025, is split in the following areas: standing agenda items, other agenda items, audit and assurance agenda items, and updated calendars for 2025 with any changes as it's highlighted. For this meeting, all the agenda items are there except for the risk management quarterly report, which has been delayed until the June 16th meeting due to the requirements for additional commissioning and training as outlined in the continuous improvement report. This will go back into normal cycle once the software is fully commissioned.
Thank you for that, Narayan. Yes, I noticed that the absence of the risk management quarterly report, and I'll take on board all your advice that needs to be June. Do you have any questions from folk on the work program? No? Look, I do suspect, particularly perhaps when we get to the issues register, which is not a risk report, but there may be 1 or 2 questions we have around almost risk-related matters, which we will come back to. I was about to say, is there anything sinister in the delay with the quarterly risk report at all? I'm looking your way, Stephen. You know, I know it's busy times, so I take it it's just a matter of getting things going.
It's just getting the new system, and particularly the reporting, because we're trying to build a Power BI dashboard that kind of meets the
Elliot, you've got to come up here. Sorry, mate, you can't come to the meeting late and not come to the front. treat that as a reprimand. Sorry, Stephen, I've been a bit naughty, wasn't I?
We're just working through the details of kind of harnessing the new system. And
this is flowingly, right?
Yep. Well, it's kind of based off the back of Flowingly, that they use Flowingly for the inputs, but it's just SharePoint and Power BI behind it.
Yeah.
So we're, the initial dashboard we had wasn't really up to scratch, so we're just working on a better one that actually meets the needs of the committee based on feedback we've had from previous ones.
Good. Well, look, I think I said at the last meeting, and I'll just repeat it. It will be, great, go for it, Cobber, and I would be appreciative if we could just have a rough demonstration, if that's the right word, of where we're flowing these at.
Yep.
And I think, Narayan, regardless of where you're at, even if, you're still challenged to get this commission and delayed, we better have a quarterly risk report in June, please. Otherwise, it'll be...
We'll have one so we're having a risk workshop.
Yep.
After that meeting, so we'll have one there that you can then
Brilliant.
take into the risk workshop to
Yeah, that's a good
discuss
place
it
for
there.
the demonstration. That'll be great. Okay, with that, can we then look at the resolution, which is that we receive and note the work committee program? Oh, sorry, I just wanted to check over the page sheets. I think the rest all followed through in terms of what you said. Sorry, do we have the draft key accounting policies here? We don't, do we? So that's going to be when, June? Okay, cool.
We're not expecting any major changes. There might be just a few tweaks from last year around fixed assets.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's pretty standard.
If it's, well, I'm reflecting. June's not too late. So look, I'll take your advice, Andrea, that there's no significant change in accounting policies. The only problem would be if there should be. So I'll take your advice on that. But if you need be, can we take that off cycle, particularly with myself and Janice, about that, just in case we don't want to get to June and suddenly find, oh yikes, there's something tad different.
So we have a interim audit starting May, so
Yes.
we'll see what comes out of that, whether there's any other changes.
So have we had the audit arrangements letter?
No.
So we need to see that, don't we? I think somewhere on my agenda I come back to that fact, which we will have to take offline, because I'm not prepared to have the interim audit start without the committee having seen the whites
Sure.
of at least the auditor's plan.
Is that later than usual? Because other organisations where had the letters and the key accounting matters.
You mean the letter from the auditors, or you mean yes?
Yeah.
They're stacked up. I'm yet to get to a meeting where I've seen one, and
Okay, so they put the local-
Janice, because I think, and I can't speak for them, but I have spoken to them a lot. Audit New Zealand are trying to work through the resourcing of who will
Okay.
get before or after the elections. What are we going for?
October?
Yeah. Okay, so essentially 31 October, yeah. So no big drama, other than we just need to think through, if we are post the elections, how we safely pass on to the new council that they can sign.
Well, if they can't do it this year, where there's no long-term plan, yeah, either way, they should be able to.
Okay, so look, thank you for that, sorry. I think we should just, at least in the minutes, note that the draft key accounting policies will be a June paper, albeit I'd like the informal arrangements that perhaps you need to give us an email with them when you've got them finalised, Andrea. That would be good. Okay, I think the rest follow on okay. So I'll move from the chair. I think I've moved or seconded that we receive a note. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks. Scotty, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Narayan, the open audit items, please.
Through the Chair, External Auditors Open Recommendations. There are 17 new recommendations from the 2024 audit report. There are altogether 24 open recommendations from the external auditors to date.
Brilliant. Questions, folk? Yes, Michelle, welcome. Go for it.
One of this is actually just, from my understanding, we talk there about approval for sale of assets. And given that we've undertaken to dispose of some assets, I just wondered, what does the delegations manual say about that? Like, at what point does it come back to council, and at what point does the CE just, or the or the property manager just get on and sell?
So far, all the properties that we've offered up for sale have come through council. So, and we haven't yet, we're close to having some offers on the table, which will come back.
So just to
wasn't
add
too
to
sure.
that,
Yeah.
the context around this audit query was around vehicles and things like that, so they just wanted a formal process put in place around the sale of disposal of vehicles and smaller items.
And then, again, just for my understanding, I wondered about the impairment assessment for the investments in the subsidiaries. So it kind of sounds like we just kind of work through a checklist to determine whether it needs impaired or not, and I take it that's just normal procedure. We don't always go out and get a valuation of our subsidiaries. And so what kind of things would trigger a revaluation?
Good question. I think where the issue was around Alpine Energy and with its issues that it's got. That's where the auditors had suggested that we look to impair that side of things, but actually when we looked at it, it wasn't significant enough for it to trigger an impairment.
I don't know, Mr Chair, is that normal? Because it makes me a wee bit nervous that it's us deciding whether to impair something that could have such an effect on our financial performance. But is that normal practice in council land?
I think I'm going to be correct in saying this. Almost definitely, yes, we should be considering this. I mean, it's our balance sheet. So we have to consider, for the benefit of our community, what is the value of our wealth? And that will include the value of our investments. It's a plug and vexed area. It's tough. But yes, the answer is definitely we should. I think it'd be important. Janice, you've got as much experience in this as I am. Is there anything you could add?
Yeah, it's up to us to determine what should be on our balance sheet, just as Bruce says, and then the auditors will audit it and determine whether they agree or not, rather than them coming along and go, oh, you shouldn't impair that. Yeah. It's up to us to do the work first.
I mean, it is a big area. I mean, it's not like for a council. This is not an investment vehicle. Obviously, if you're an investment vehicle, the value of your investments becomes highly important and subjective to the result that you incur. But we still have to see the same thing when we've got these sorts of investments. We have to consider the value and the impact. I think the important thing there is indeed you'd have to, Andrea, correct me if I'm wrong, have that ongoing view, A, to valuation and B, to impairment. I mean, the important point you're saying is that actually there was nothing here that was significant that would give rise to any change in the value. Sorry, Michelle, got another question?
Ask one last question, and given that both of our major investments are co-owned by other shareholders, do we look to see what they're doing? For example, the other owner of Prime Port, whether they impair or not? Because it would be odd if one party did and the other didn't.
Good idea.
We haven't, but we can this year.
And the challenge, intuitively you are dead correct, but the standards are and could give rise to different responses from different shareholders. So, look, it would be great if we knew the other partner was impairing. It would be evidence that we should look very carefully at why, shall we say, we aren't.
But that's coming through it via a owned CCO.
Yeah.
So it's actually TDHL.
That's right.
That's the whole reason we put it there, is for them to manage those and to actually do the decisions around impairment or not.
Although Nigel, I hate to say it, I still see sometimes differences between a holding company and a parent. In certain circumstances, and depending on the nature of financial instruments that relate between
That would then be whether we're impairing the value of TDHL.
Yeah. No, fair point. What it does reflect is that in some way the performance and the risks of your investments can surface at a parent level, which you have to consider. Cool. That's a very interesting and good question. It's a good accounting question. We're into home territory. Righty, anything else? Look, there is one matter there which I just want to be conscious my name's there. Nigel, if I can treat it as informally, you and I are going to catch up later. It's around the hearing fees. I have got some comments which I would like to take offline and just discuss with you, please. Anything else that we need to discuss at this stage? Just one thing for me, and I'm not quite certain who I should be looking at. It could be you, Andrew, I don't know. We've got 17 new recommendations, I think it was the number, wasn't it, out of the auditors. Do we have a sort of like a project plan just to nail them, rather than sort of like death by 1,000 cuts where you bring back to the team where, you know, da-da-da-da-da?
Yes, we do.
We do? Great, okay.
And a lot of them came out of inconsistencies in the change of audit team.
Yeah.
And the timing of that. So it put pressure on when they said, well, actually, you know, what you did in the prior year was not necessarily correct. Yeah. And when they picked it up, essentially the call was made to, let's just put it on the list. We were consistent with last year, but let's look at it going.
I'm very conscious that you don't quite correctly remove these technically. I mean, I'm sure you'll tell me you've dealt to them, like you do normally, but you won't remove them until the auditor has signed off. I'm not quite certain how audits work these days. Rudy and you guys can tell me better. But my presumption is the interim audit is always the chance for them to check that we've got our controls up to date. So I'd like to think that in June we have audit approved clearance of a lot of items, please. So if we could just keep that on, if you could put that on your list, that'd be really good. Any other points, questions folk would like to raise? Can we go to the resolution, which is we receive and note the outstanding report. Thank you, Narayan, for keeping everybody up to the mark on this one. We'll move in a seconder. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Peter. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Right, Narayan, internal audit activities, please.
Through the chair, the internal audit activities. Contract management audit is in progress. New global internal audit standards is effective from 9th January 2025. Yes, discussed in the December ARC meeting. So the revision of internal audit charter will be presented to align with the new standards for June submission.
Yep.
Annual internal audit work program for 2025-26 is also in progress for June submission. Internal audit month is normally globally May, and as such, to align with that, I'll try to create more awareness about risk and assurance functions for better collaboration in the council. The following audits are planned for the remainder of 2025: Land Information Memorandum, LIM process, and Resource and Building Consent process.
Brilliant. Thank you, Narayan. Appreciate that. Really, it's work progress. Folk, do we have questions on this for Narayan? Yeah, Scotty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is possibly more a question for Mr. Cooper, actually, with regard to the upcoming reviews, the resource and building consent process. I just wonder, with the work that's currently being done on all of those consenting activities, what the value is of doing this before that actually happens.
Thanks for the question. Are you meaning the 17-year review of the building activity? Yeah. So my approach has been that we carry on as if it's in-house until such time as the decision's made to take it out. Otherwise, we might create work unnecessarily. So I think we come back on the 1st of April with a nice tidy 17-year review of the activity, and then council can give some direction as to which direction it wants to pursue. If it wants to pursue taking the activity outside as a CCO, then we've kind of got to build it from that point, based on the legal framework that we're getting from our legal advisors and technical advisors at MB. So my approach is do nothing until it's something.
Beg your pardon. Then would the 17A not pick this up anyway then? What we're talking about here? So I wonder then why, if
I would say that
resources would be better diverted elsewhere.
I mean, the 17A is more about doing it more efficiently and who service, whereas this audit will be looking at processes and the nuts and bolts of the place. And I think it's actually a useful bit of work to do prior to any major changes, because it can identify any deficiencies in progress prior to them being baked into what could be a new entity. That kind of sets a baseline of where we're at right now and allows you to take those recommendations into any new, whether it's just keeping in-house or whether it's building a new thing from scratch.
Yes, Michelle?
Doesn't the Building Control Authority get external audits as well? And so I'm just trying to understand, what are we going to focus on that's not already audited? Because I'd hate just to audit something that's already audited.
I think any auditing for the purposes of audit and risk would be around the accounting and maybe the company structure, legal risks that you might be taking on that might not exist while it's in-house. And there's a slightly different risk landscape when you take it out. So I think those things are worth considering and bringing to this committee about what that risk looks like, but not until we decide that that's a path we're going to pursue. Yeah. The actual process of processing a building consent is very prescribed, and that's covered by the Building Act. And yes, we're audited on that biannually by IANZ. So that side of it takes care of itself. It's more, I suppose, of the legal company structure, the accounting structure, and how we meet the legal requirements of that, the CCO side of things, I suppose, and the accounting side of things for the CCO, particularly when you've got a trading component of a CCO. So it gets a bit complicated in there.
Can I help clarify? I think the internal audit is right down in the nuts and bolts of how we do things and the systems and the controls that are around those. The 17A review is at a higher level looking at how do we function, how does this particular department function, and what is the efficiency of that, and how might you do it going forward. So they are fundamentally different, but they're related, because I would anticipate the 17A review will come out and tell us that we are undercharging, we are not covering our costs, and et cetera, et cetera. I'll be surprised if it doesn't do that, because I think I already know that. But then it will go on to say this is our recommendation on the best way to go forward. And I think you've got to let that review come up with the best way without preempting it. Whereas the internal audit is about, have you got the right controls in place?
I understand that, but I'm trying to understand the difference between the external audit and the internal audit, and how they're focused on, I assume, different things.
Yeah, I would anticipate the external audit is more against legislation of the actual function of producing the consents and or the whatever it's called. Yeah. Whereas this is actually even broader, is going into your processes and how you are processing it. Does that make sense?
It does to me, if I can just insert myself here, Michelle. Look, I think it would be good just to check. I mean, you're giving us an indication of work here, not the actual scope. I couldn't help but note in both that billing is critical. So we can be legally compliant but be under-recovering, Michelle, and without wanting to be too much of an accountant. I think it would be fair, probably, Nigel, that actually, like most parts of local government in this country, we need all the money we can get in the door. So quite frankly, I'd be very interested to know that actually we are recovering. Otherwise, we've got to find the money somewhere else. And that ranges then into the practice of how we do the work. And that can be, I hate to say it, from a building inspector's and consenter, how they manage their time. Can we bill it? Is it unrecoverable? Why is it unrecoverable? Those are things that desperately need to be known at a governance level. And also, nothing goes out the door without a bill paid, sort of type thing. Or if it goes out the door, why does it? Paul, you'll be stronger on this than I am. But I think that, to me, is really important. Albeit I did want to pick up a very good point that I think you made, knowing that Elliot's in the room as well, Paul, which is the importance that we talked about when we had your legislative compliance paper, that as Narian does this sort of work, we should have an eye to how well we are carrying out our legal obligations, given there's a chance for an eyesight there. So there is that sort of detailed in-house. We look under the hood properly. Well, let's say properly, that's wrong. IANs do it properly as well, Michelle. But this is very much from our perspective and our focus and scope, rather than a broad-based IANs, or indeed, dare I say it, your 17A. Yeah. Have I convinced you? You don't have to. Honestly, can you expand it all? I'll let Janice have her.
Well, I was just about to say, we will bring the terms of reference back to the committee prior to the audit taking place as well. So you can have a view of what it is and input where you think it's missing things as well.
And if there's consideration of outsourcing it, having the internal audit may well provide indicators of how the contract and what the KPIs and things might need to be. So it's useful timing, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's a really good discussion. Thank you for your questions, and that's really helpful. So, Narian, just to sort of just to control the program. So June is going to be important because you're going to come back to us with your internal audit program for next year, correct? Can you make it out the next 3 years? I think you should, by the way. Sarah, let's hold off. I'm making an assumption you'll have a risk committee in the new tronium. You can never assume that when you're an independent, can you? But I would ideally think that we should be thinking tronium and 3 years out if it's ideal.
Yeah.
And I also think, given you are quite well, actually, I hadn't realised the new internal audit standards had come into effect from 9 January. Again, I'd like to see the charter, and if you could reflect for us what has been a change in the charter as a result of the internal audit standards, that would be great. Janice?
Yeah, just on that 3 years, I think that's useful to have a rolling 3 years indicative, and then the
yes, thank you. Indicative, emphasis on them. Actual.
Firm, and then there's some optionality around what might be coming at us in the next 18 months. So it's just indicative.
That sounds good. Would you want to set that firmly after the election, or so at the December meeting?
No, I'd do it now. Sorry, I don't. It doesn't. I mean, elections are important for a whole bunch of obvious reasons. But I mean, this is the good mothership to Maru just charting its course. It can always be subject to change, but I would rather, to be honest, we gave the new council a sense and a pathway which they can alter if they want to. But I think we should be saying, look, as we've run through the organisation with Narian, these and our current risk profile, these are the logical things. And Janice, thank you for your advice, Narian. Indicative, we're not going to hold you to it, but indicative that's firmed up. The other question I had in terms of dates was under paragraph 5, the remainder of 2025. You're talking the calendar year, not the financial year, aren't you? Yeah, I just think that's reasonably important to note. So we are putting quite a bit of big effort for 2 big audits into our LIM and building consent process. Okay, any other... Yes, Janice?
Yeah, Nadia, and I'm just interested in what is being done about raising awareness of the functions for better collaboration. So how are you doing that?
Thank you, Madam. Currently, I'm with the help of the SLT, so the awareness is there. So with this, I'm trying to go to Tier 3 and bottom level, because currently, I believe like SP internal audit is still new in Timaru. So the issue is like all the staffs so that they are able to understand the purpose of internal audit as evaluating and trying to bring about improvement rather than trying to think that it's a policing tool. So I believe, as per my conversations with the colleagues, some of them are still not that much aware about the functions of internal audit, and also internal audit relies on the staffs to help me, to guide me, like if there are some issues of high risk or there are some issues that audit needs to undertake. So I believe with this more awareness and collaboration with the SLT and then the Tier 3 managers and the next level, it will be able to bring about that more awareness, and it will also help me and them, and overall assist the council as a whole to being more effective internal audit unit in the council.
Yeah, because I think it's important that the organisation believes and understands that internal audit isn't about finding mistakes, it's about improvements and improving the way things are done. So, good, thank you for that.
In the grand tradition of councils, we're having a look around to see where other councils are doing good things. We'll steal them with impunity. So, yeah, no, we're looking to make it reasonably engaging and just trying to get away from that kind of audit view.
Internal should be helping us add value to our organisation.
Seems like we're really cracking your paper open, Marianne. I will be interested in the results of the contract management review. A personal observation as I get around the country, cost control and containment is critical to our financial aspirations. We will not ever make ourselves, we won't efficiency-ise, if it's a verb, our way to financial success, but it's part of it, and contract management is so critical in terms of our financial strategy. So when it comes, I would like a wee bit of focus on that, because it will be indicative of a particularly key area in terms of cost control for us. It'd be great. Okay, any other question folk would like to raise? No? Can I look at the motions, please, which is that we receive the update, we confirm the upcoming areas, and we've had a really good debate on that. Thank you for Scotty and Michelle for sponsoring that. And we have provided guidance on audit priorities for the upcoming year, which is risk-based, 3 years indicative, please, Stephen. Okay, I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Scotty. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. G'day, Sam. You escaped my BDI from making you come and sit with us the whole time, so you've beaten me, so well done. Welcome to the meeting. In your hands, please.
Thank you. Kia ora. Okay. The Magic software facilitates budget planning, expense monitoring and financial reporting. Templates for monthly financial and CAPEX reports are in user acceptance testing. Changes include budget reconfiguration, program budget logic revisions, and percentage-based funding adjustments. Flowingly is a process management platform that automates and optimizes workflows. Processes and risks have been migrated from ProMap with training and reviews underway. The risk module for risk management and visualization is undergoing user testing to ensure it is functioning as intended. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. Nigel.
My question's more around how the likes of Magic will align. Probably a question for you, CFO. To if we update authority, then is this work redundant, or does it still work in parallel?
It will still work in parallel. So what we're currently using Magic for is our annual plan process and also our forecast process. So the December forecast was run through Magic, and the annual plan is currently running through Magic as well.
Okay.
So the team have the opportunity to make changes, write comments, that kind of thing. But the way Magic operates is you do your revenue and expenditure, your capital, calculates your depreciation, your interest and all the rest of it, and then the final step is to calculate your funding required from rates. So we're at the top sort of process at the moment, going through revenue and expenditure and capital. And then from there, hopefully later this week, we'll be able to run the process through to see where our annual plan is tracking.
So does that then give us the ability to have more of a, through magic, bottom up, or do we still have the same challenge of?
Still have the same challenge. Yeah.
When you say bottom up, what do you mean, Nigel?
So I mean a specific group within council setting their budgets. We can, let's not use the words pull it apart, but challenge it. What we're not seeing is the detail at that level to be able to throw some questions over that. We're seeing a top-down model, whereas it's across all of council as opposed to being able to get into some more.
I think it's doing both. So effectively, magic is the forecast versus the last year's budget is our starting point. So every single unit manager is actually doing their forecasts, and they are also, that is transpiring into the next year's budget, and we are having meetings right down at that level. We've met with every single unit manager going through their budgets. So it is ultimately a bottom up. You can't avoid doing a bit of top down as well, because there will be things that that only lend themselves to top down, like setting your rates and things like that. So it feels this year that we're getting a lot of buy-in. We've had meetings with all tier 2s and 3s, and we've had one-on-one meetings with the CFO, myself, and the unit managers on every single budget. So we have pulled back quite a bit. We found some errors. We've also found some stuff the other way as well, where it's just blatantly under budgeted. Does that help?
Sure. Yes.
Actually, it helps me, Nigel. I'm going to tear to suck eggs and be a bit risky, but I was a bit, I think I'm trying to understand where management are going from a bottom-up review, which perhaps I'm being a bit rude in saying that's management's preserved, but I think we have to have, as governors, confidence that that sort of review is actually occurring. Otherwise it is opaque, and I think it's important that it's understood.
And I think it's also, I think it's demonstrated in that this year, so far, we're actually under budget on our expenses, and we're bang on with our staff costs, so effectively it's been controlled well, albeit the budget isn't perfect. And I was thinking over the weekend that a council lends itself to having really, really robust expense budgets, because more so than a lot of other entities, because of the funding model. The funding model is so pointed at different things, and then you've got to put your rates over the top. And it is for me coming in, is having been in other entities, it's so different. Yeah. And I was giving Andrew a hard time last week about, show me where the problem is. And what I hadn't realised, your rates is your last thing, and it balances everything. But actually, when you're not rating enough, it doesn't balance everything, and then you go, well, where the problem is. And it's actually the expenses on everything you've got to look at. Did that make sense?
Good career enhancing answer, Paul. So, I mean, that's really that's a very interesting discussion, because I mean, this is Nigel. I'm also interested in Narayan's work, for instance, around contract management, because and actually your question around the quality of the magic reporting tool, because what we monitor, how we monitor, and actually how we drive our costs is actually, if I could be read, I think that's a strong governance need, let alone a management need. That's where the governance and management interface to have the confidence. But ours is coming a wee bit from the top down rather than the bottom up, because I'll be looking to this boy here to do the hard yards. You're welcome to disagree with me, by the way, Nigel. So I'm only giving you my view, mate. You can tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, the key thing is, from government's point of view, is that we just need confidence in the data that's coming through us so we can make a decision. And I don't think, around the table, I'd say we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. Well, I think that's obvious. That's why Sam's project here is so important, working with Andrea and the team. I agree. This perhaps you're signalling this is mission critical. And so consequently, the fact that it's, it's delayed, because it's the only one with an orange on it, actually might be the real question. Why, and can we nail it quickly?
I'm confident in the overall number that we produce out of the financial system. I think our Achilles heel is we haven't nailed the reporting.
Yeah.
And that reporting, as it is at the moment, leads to, it dents the confidence. It actually becomes an issue. So,
Yes.
And it's actually, that's where the concentrated effort needs to be, is designing and ensuring those reports are really hitting the need of councillors and management. And at the moment, I don't think they are fully. And also they seem to me to be quite resource heavy, getting them out the other side. High reliance on spreadsheets, high reliance on ad hoc reporting, and we've got to change that. Now, hopefully Magic does the job, but we'll wait and see. I'm used to a reporting system where you design it and you get the drill down right down to the transaction. Now, if I can achieve that, I'm happy.
So I go to my question, Sam or Andrea. The risk is around time. It's yellow. I'm not too worried whether it should be something different. We're saying October 25. Is it nailed by then?
Yes, Mr. Chair, yes, we're hoping October 25 we'll be able to have this up and running.
So Sam, the delay, it says here it's due to extensive user testing.
That's correct.
Is that because it was missing the mark and they needed to do more testing, or is it because there's a delay in people getting to testing? What's actually causing the delay?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think it would be a combination of both. It would be the user testing, people getting to do the user testing, as well as there's been some changes. We've realised that we want to make it more user specific, and so that would be the reasons.
There's also another side to it, is actually getting the discipline from managers to go in and update their forecasts, and actually the discipline of looking at what their numbers are telling them. And also, and I don't think we've quite got that. When you look at the forecast, there are a number of departments that still, it's got the beauty of giving you a tick or cross whether they've been in there. There's a number that still haven't been in there, so that's an issue. And secondly, it's getting their attention onto what they can control rather than constantly going on about overheads.
I think what I'd say here, Sam and Nigel and Andrea, is this is almost a risk discussion. Because if we're outside our risk appetite, arguably it suggests we've got to apply resources. So to use that sort of analogy, I think if I've picked up the feeling of the meeting, this is just a wee bit out of control. Out of control is too dramatic, but actually delivery on a time here is actually more imperative to us. So to get that yellow back to green and keep October, which I can accept as a reasonable date because it's going to be the end of the first quarter of the new year. And if we're working this in the new year, that gives us a strong sense. We'll be going into the next annual plan. That'll give us strong sense as well. So I think I just want to give a wee message here, if I've picked up the feeling of my colleagues right. Timing here and getting this nailed is mission critical. I suspect we would trade off objectives elsewhere to see this done. Because it's, Nigel, going right back to give fairness to your original question, we need the confidence, and until this is nailed, we are missing a little piece in our armour to be able to have that confidence. Yeah, Nigel?
We're also, we've got the sign-off from council to go and investigate either re-implementing the system, which is authority, or looking for a new one. However, before that, we're going to have a workshop, and I'm thinking of getting it facilitated on our systems in totality, because I think we really lack a ITIS strategic plan that we all can hang on to and say that's where we're going. It feels to me that we've been a bit ad hoc.
Yep.
When a need comes up, we react to that and put something in place, but I'm not convinced it's been done in a holistic, with a holistic. Now, I may be doing Justin a disservice because he may have that, but I think we've got to bring that forward and actually really own the strategy. This is where we're heading with ITIS.
Right.
Now, and part of that conversation will be is it may place more importance on magic than authority, because authority will probably do the APAR and all of that fine, but actually, in my mind, the reporting part is the magic. Oh, that's strange. It's called magic, but that's where it's got to. That's where the system's got to be really, really good.
Yeah. It's better being called magic than manipulate or something like that. So I'll take magic. Yeah, thank you. I agree entirely with what you're saying, Nigel. Janice.
Nigel, just a bit of clarification about the processes that you follow internally around projects, because this, for instance, is a project, and in other organisations you might see a project management office and interacting with SLT to make sure that the prioritisation of each one is appropriate, that the resourcing is appropriate, etc. Now that can't sit with Sam. So say Magic, for instance, who's the business owner, and how is the prioritisation, etc., moderated through SLT?
I think since I've been here, Councillor Scott here has been constantly banging on about needing a project management.
Do you want to repeat it at the moment, Stacey, or are we okay?
Not necessarily a project management office, project management, what's the word for it? Process that we all use. Now here it's all different. So last week I went around water and roading and said, how does your project management work? And they're different. They're all different. Such as the vertical build, it's different. This is different. So I think we've got to actually say this is the methodology we're going to use, and we should all follow that. And I think it does need a lot more treating a project as a project rather than BAU, because I think that's what we tend to do a lot. So the owner of Magic will be Andrea, CFO. Yeah.
Yeah, because when they stand alone, then you get that competing and there's no cross-talking, because it's all for the good of the council and the district. So, yeah, it's got to be moderated somehow.
Just a comment on Magic. We had a project manager to start with. They resigned and went somewhere else. We got a new person in, and at that point in time, Magic had made some changes to Magic as well. And then that person who was leading that has since passed on. Not passed on, but
moved on.
Resigned. Sorry. Has resigned, and we've now just picked it up again. We've also using an external, dare I say it, contractor. Support, yes, external support to actually get it up fully running and be that person.
Yeah, so I wasn't talking so much about inside the project and the project management of it, because I'm sure you guys can do all that. It's about knitting the matrix of projects together across the whole council and making sure they all align and are prioritised appropriately.
At a couple of our biggest projects, I think one's stumbling because it hasn't got that, whereas the other two are now flying.
Well, look, thank you for that. I think that's a really valuable discussion, and appreciate you inspiring us on that one, Nigel, and your contribution. Other Nigel.
Sorry, Bruce, I just have another question.
Oh, sorry, Michelle.
Which is kind of related, but it's about the ESCA procure to pay, and I was delighted to hear what Mr Traynor was saying about having a look at all of our, because I sat here and made a note and went, it's almost like we need a flowchart on how something starts in this organisation and then ends up in a report. And so my question is about the procure to pay, And how does that flow then through to our general ledger? Because, you know, we've had in the past issues of miscoding, and that's why budgets are out and things like that, which I understand. But with this procured pay, does it flow to the general ledger? And so does it start with the person kind of saying, this is what this is for? Because, and this is nobody's fault, but rubbish in, rubbish out. And we need to make sure what we're putting into the system is right. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how magic is. It's not going to be worth anything.
So the procure to pay system, it does talk to authority, but it's purely a purchase system. What it doesn't have is the ability to tie a budget to a person, because we have a lot of people that cross over because of the way that the activities are set up. We have a lot of people that cross over a whole lot of different activities, so we can't tie it to that person and that budget. So it doesn't tie it down as much as what we would like it to.
When you get an invoice coming in, there's no link back to ESCA and who ordered it and where it should be coded to, or
Yes, there is. Yeah. So it's a purchase order system.
Yeah, okay.
So when that invoice comes in, it's matched with that purchase order.
Okay.
But that comes down to the person who's written out that purchase order.
Yes.
And then the person who's approved that purchase order as the double check to say, hey, is it gone to the right place? And questioning that person at that point in time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
There are some controls in it that I think are weak, so we will look at that. But you can, you know, you'll see the invoice on ESCA, so you can go and approve it. But as Andrea says, the way we set up, you know, you can have two managers of one department, and it's also not locked down that I can't just go into your department and order something and everything flows through beautifully, but it's actually, you know nothing about it.
That is a worry, and do we have a plan to try and
I think
fix it, or?
even moving to altitude, which is authority, I still don't think that it's tied down that tight. So I'm not sure how a system could cope with the fact that we have different departments, different activities.
So it might come back to my question I've asked in chambers before about how come when you hit a budget we just seem to keep on spending and we have all this overspent, but maybe therein lies the problem.
Thank you for that. Nigel, and I'm looking your way, Stephen. There seems to be something here that might be quite good to pull together. You've talked about an IT strategy or whatever. We have a particular need, and again, I go back to the committee's sense we need that magic nailed. But then you raised a very good issue around consistency of project management across the organisation, whether it's PMO or the likes, and even I bang on about my desire to see the contract management. They all come back to confidence around delivering at the right price, at the right cost, and knowing where we're at. Stephen, I do wonder, there's something in here that actually I think is a really valid role for the committee. I'm not trying to justify my existence, I feel like I am, but a really valid role for the committee to be providing oversight around drawing this all together, but actually encouraging its development rather than trying to impede and ask negative questions. So I just wonder if outside the meeting perhaps you and I could have a consideration about, does this lead us anywhere, rather than sort of perhaps a disparate discussion where a few things are being called on but we're not actually, you know, we'll be here next month, and you'll start with your good question, Nigel, and then all of a sudden we'll be in the same loop. I'm about to say doom loop, that's not the way to put it, but you know what I mean. That's really good. Thank you for that. That's a really, really... Oh, Stacey, you got a question or a point? You're welcome to. No, go for it, Stacey. Is it about the PMO?
No, it's about... no, I've given up almost on that. I'm just going to change the topic, if that's okay. It was just some personal feedback on Active Carrot. Now it's gone live. I think it's awesome that it's obviously reducing administration loads, but as a mum with children that attend swimming every day, the system fails to be able to allow you to set up automatic payments. And so I'd be really interested to know how many people miss paying their monthly fees because it's heavily reliant on me remembering to pay on the 20th of the month. Yes, my children's fobs stop working and I get a rebut from them, but it's really disappointing now that that capability is gone, so you can't set up automatic payments to pay your bill anymore. So it'd be really good if that could change, because I know lots of swimming parents that kids' fobs stop working.
Can't you just do that through your bank?
None. It won't allow you to do any of that. You've got to just pay on the 20th of the month or whatever. It's just an invoice.
Yeah, I'll note that and see what we can do.
Thank you for that. That's good, honest feedback about ease of living in Timaru, and it would be good if it was easier. So that's great. Thank you for that.
Maybe
Can
marry
anything
it,
else that we need to do?
Marry it to that flowingly, and it might help.
Too early in the morning, that's right. Can we move, the very helpful discussion, Sam, thank you for your paper. I do appreciate the committee as a whole have looked at that, and for the openness of the responses from management. I appreciate that too. The resolution is that we receive and note the report that we would have action for you and me, Steve, to have a chat to see whether this goes in a different direction, but other than that, I think we can receive and note. I'll have a mover in a second, please. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Peter. I thought you were smiling at me. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Sensitive expenditure. Brendan, I take it. Welcome to the meeting, Brendan. Nice to meet you, man. I'm Bruce Robertson, and Janice is the other person you may not have met, the other independent on the committee. Welcome here, buddy. In your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Committee members, good morning. This report is essentially a listening exercise in some respects around the upcoming review of the sensitive expenditure policy. I will note at the outset that my colleague Nigel isn't here today. He's on leave moving house, and judging by the text that he sent me about his how tired he was prior to 9 a.m, I think he wishes he was here. But anyway, effectively, this policy is due for review every 3 years. It's due for review at the end of this year, and so we're getting ahead of ourselves to begin the review. ARC is a key part of the authorising and approving of this policy, so we were keen to get your collective feedback on how you think the policy is working and if there's any areas that you think we should be looking at as part of the review. I'll also note a couple of things that us officers have identified. For example, the current policy and guidelines are, as per the attachment to the report, in 2 parts. We've had some feedback from internal staff that this is a little bit confusing in terms of how they use and cross-reference the document, so we're looking to probably consolidate that. There's some information that's now potentially not up to date because it's been 3 years. An example of that might be around private vehicle usage. And we also feel that there's, in some respects, an opportunity to provide clearer operational guidance to staff. One key thing that we're looking to potentially add in is around the use of P cards, and Andrea might like to speak to that, seeing as Nigel's not here in a moment. But other than that, like I say, this is a listening exercise. We are keen to get your feedback on how you think the policy may or may not be performing, especially noting that you get quarterly reports as a standing item about the use of sensitive expenditure, and also keen to understand any potential indicators that you might like to be built into the policy to help you understand whether it is working as you wish. Andrea, is there anything you want to touch on before we open for questions? No? Okay. As simple as that. I'm happy to take in questions and collectively we'll answer them as best we can.
Look, I wonder, before I just open it up, you mentioned a wee bit of staff feedback relative to the procedures versus the policy. Perhaps I can understand that, although when I looked at it, it looked pretty straightforward to me. But you know, I don't have to live with it from a day-to-day basis. So if it is a problem, it's a problem. So we need to get that with the people. I take it the incidents. Well, I'm asking the question: is the incidence around, shall we say, adhering to the good procedures around sensitive expenditure a particular problem? Do we have do we have an incidence, perhaps I shouldn't say high, low, or in between, do we have an incidence of concern that and it's probably people not being able to interpret, and therefore we're getting spend that is out of whack?
I don't think so, no.
No. So low rent in terms of
Yes.
the problems with staff and indeed,
Yeah.
dare I say it, councillors, because I sign off the sensitive expenditure for Nigel. So low rent from a pragmatic perspective, this isn't causing lots of problems for staff, correct?
I haven't heard the feedback, but some of the problem for staff might be the delegations rather than this, such as someone in the water department, struggles to be able to go and buy an O-ring for something they're fixing.
Yeah.
Without going through 3 tiers to get it approved.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's the sort of stuff which might be influencing the feedback. Sensitive expenditure is a subset of what we buy, but it's got its own set of procedures and policies around it. But I wonder whether they are mixing the two.
Yeah.
Certainly not aware of any systemic issues.
Yep.
The anecdotal feedback that we've received from a couple of people is just in regards to ensuring that it's clear in terms of what they can and can't do. Some of that is surely procedural based. One thing I'll also note is the policy is strictly for officers. The elected member sensitive expenditure is contained within a separate policy that will come up later this year as part of the triennial governance policies.
Brilliant.
Just to be clear on that.
So, folk, do we have general feedback for Brendan at this stage? Yes, Michelle.
Brendan knew I'd ask a question. I love policy. The only thing that I found missing in this, and I may have missed it because I read a lot yesterday, but the policy in the manual is written on the assumption that sensitive expenditure will be approved. And there's nothing in there of what happens if I go and buy something and the manager says that's not allowed. Do I have to pay that back? Is there a right of appeal somewhere else? I just thought it was silent on all of that.
That is a good observation, something that we also feel is the case, and I think that's one reason why Nigel said to start getting P cards approved to reduce this expectation that there will be reimbursements and to just reduce the number of reimbursements in total.
But even when you get P cards, where does it say in here that if you use it for something that is then deemed not to be appropriate, that you have to pay it back? It's not really in here.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments?
Yeah, Bruce, I just got one on policy versus procedure, and I'm a fan of keeping them separate because policies, to my mind, should be quite short, as brief as possible, and succinct about what the intention is, and the procedure should be how you apply the policy, and muddying them together just loses some of that clarity.
Agreed and noted.
And Brendan, the only comment I had was going even higher, and I'm sure you're aware of the sort of the way the Auditor General is encouraging us to think about our set of integrity, or our integrity framework, for which this is part of it. Dare I say it, the members' policy, but actually even things like protected disclosure all become part of that total integrity framework. It's not essential, but I would encourage us to start thinking in that sort of umbrella sense about integrity and how this fits in here. The only other thing I would endorse, I endorse all the comments, but particularly Janice's, I like the separation. Can the procedures be changed solely on your say, Nigel, or do they come back to council or this committee?
So operationally, how it normally works with council policies, excuse me, is that the policy, if any amendments to the policy need to go through the approving body, but procedures and appendices to the policies, etc., go through whoever the policy owner is. So in this case, it is the chief executive. However, noting, if I go to the actual document, bear with me as I turn pages. This one, because it's split into two separate documents, it has any changes to the procedures in this case need to be endorsed by the Audit and Risk Committee, so it's slightly different here. If you want to keep that the same and ensure that ARC has that level of oversight for the procedures as well as for the policy, then that's certainly some feedback that we can receive.
Well,
I'd suspect that stems from the interest the Auditor General takes in sensitive expenditure.
Just to notice 9.1 says it's dealt with by the, it's reviewed, sorry, will be reviewed, any amendments. So this is the procedure, guidelines and procedures will be approved by the Chief Executive in consultation with the SLT. I think the point that you're making, Nigel, which is quite correct, this is because it's sensitive. As in contrast to the delegations for approval of spend, I think it is useful if we're at least informed on behalf of governance as to what are the procedures and guidelines. Whether that's formal approval, you'll work that one out. But I mean, we're seeing them already, so thank you. That's good. I just wonder whether 9.1 is consistent with actually where we should be as a whole. Is that helpful for you, Brendan, to take that forward? Brilliant.
Absolutely, and as noted in the report, we're looking to bring a draft policy for internal consultation in the next few months, and then provide at your next meeting a proposed final policy for your feedback, and you can receive the benefit of that internal consultation.
Brilliant.
If that is agreeable with the committee.
Brilliant. Yes, sorry, Scotty.
I just got a few bits and pieces that I'll just give to you directly, but in terms of, these are the sorts of things that they need to be crystal clear and accurate all the way through, of course, don't they? So just for a start, when we're using titles throughout there, it might say group manager or director and that sort of thing. I just wonder if going forward, because titles do change, should it just refer to tier 2 or tier 3, that sort of thing, that remain consistent forever? That's just a question. And also when I look at things like under 2.15, 16, 17, when it talks about fuel cards and the likes, just to double check that those statements are actually correct, that fuel cards are provided in each council car, that sort of thing, or are they provided for the drivers, those sorts of things. When purchasing fuel, the driver enters the correct odometer reading. Does this happen? Does it always happen? All of those things. There's no point putting something in there if it's not always the case. Yeah.
Thank you for those comments, Scotty. It's great. Okay, well, we'll treat that as a bit of feedback, and we'll move on. So the recommendation is that we receive a verbal update from the officers. We've done that, and we have provided the officers with feedback. I think is what that should simply read in the past tense. We've provided officers with feedback. Brilliant. Do I move and second for that? Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Nigel. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. In fact, just I'm conscious of time. No other reason, not because we haven't gone for an hour yet. Oh no, we have gone for an hour. At 10:30 we will need to go into PX because we are meeting with Aon, correct, over our insurance policy. So I think what would be good is if perhaps I look to just have a short break around about 20 past, just before 20 past, just so you can get a cup of tea, check your phones, and we will then have Aon. So we'll keep going through. Okay, mate. Okay. Credit rating review, Andrew. This is a good news story.
That is a good news story. Through you, Mr. Chair, when we were writing this paper to bring forward the 2025 announcement, realised that we hadn't actually formally brought the 2024 report in its glossy version to this committee. So the first report is a glossy 2024, and the announcement of the 2025, which I'm suspecting will get a pretty version with graphs and things like that later on. So these here are receiver notes basically we've kept our credit rating this year. There were comments at a Canterbury Finance Managers meeting on Friday that Standard & Poor's are looking at councils and were that they would potentially start to drop some councils. Luckily this year we use Fitch, so I'm not sure whether that will continue with Fitch, but at this point we're still AA minus.
Thank you. Do you have questions, comments folk would like to make? Yes, Michelle.
No, where you go.
Oh, sorry?
No, Janice had a question too, but that's okay. Andrea, I just want to understand the process of how we engage and how often we change, and you just talked about Standard & Poor's, so is it kind of similar to how we engage an auditor, or how does that work? And great result, by the way, sorry.
So basically it's a reasonably simple process. They do a lot of work themselves. They look at our long-term plan, they look at our annual reports, they send a questionnaire which covers finances, it covers just general commentary, it talks about Timaru, it talks about TDHL, Venture Timaru, those kind of things. We then have a formal interview with them. That's a verbal conversation for them to ask any questions that they haven't been able to collect through the written material that's published. And then they go away, send us an invoice and make their decision.
But so sorry, when do we make the decision who to engage with, like whether it's Fitch or Standard & Poor's, or do we just go, Fitch have been great to us, keep using them forever and a day, or at some point do we go, actually we've used them for 10 years, it's probably worth having a change?
I don't know, to be honest. It's not something in my time where it's been Fitch, and I'm not sure what the process is around changing. Whether we would change, not sure.
I'm keen to hear from Janice and the chair then what's normal.
Well, you go first, Bruce, in terms of councils.
It's a balance, isn't it, between changing horses and actually what that might show, which is actually we don't like the old crowd, let's find a crowd that give us a better rating. Having said that, I don't think any rating agency should be necessarily secure in its work with us. It's an interesting question which would be worth checking with other local authorities, Andrea, in the long run, because we're really still only in the first tranche of credit rating. Apart from one or two councils that have been long-term credit raters, it is still relatively first term from a sort of a 3 to 5 year period, obviously warranted because of LGFA and the rates that it gives us with an appropriate credit rating. I think if it's done with an appropriate dispassionate look at efficiency, I don't see any problem why. I would think you want to go at least 5 years before you consider actually who the provider is to avoid too much of the, we don't like this crowd, so we'll go for the other crowd, which as far as I know there's only the two, well there's Moody's as well I suppose, isn't it? But yes. Janice, your view?
Yeah, I'd been going to ask a question around how many councils use Fitch and how many use Standard & Poor's. In the finance sector was where I'm used to looking at credit ratings, you don't change too often for the very reputational risk of why are they changing. But then there are can be subtle differences between the rating agencies, and you might decide to go with one lot because they're better for where you're positioned than the other lot. So in terms of council land, I'd stay with the crowd or where the crowd are, or if it's sort of 50-50, why would you change when they already know you? And anyway, yeah, I don't think it makes much difference.
I don't think there is, and I mean this is something that would be, particularly given our position, relevant to talk. It would be relevant to talk to our GFA, because this actually is the primary driver to have a rating that is good. I suspect for them, and I can't speak for them, but I suspect it is not a problem whether you have a Fitch or a Standard & Poor's rating, okay? you're right, Janice, I defer to your experience, they do have slightly different approaches, but I don't think that's one that our GFA has a particular problem in dealing with.
I guess my main question is there a risk with staying with the same assessor for too long, like there is with an auditor sometimes, and probably not in council land, but in commercial world?
I think it's minimised, but what always interests me, particularly now that probably Fitch and Standard & Poor's have come out with these reports which are much more understandable, is actually what use we make of them. Because actually it's quite, reading the report, although it's a wee bit, propeller-headish, is actually really quite good. And when I look at page 59 and how they look at risk, there's a bit of value in that for us, particularly when it comes to our annual plan or particularly our long-term plan, thinking about in terms of those sorts of categories. My eyes are a bit fuzzy with the PDF printout, but they are actually really useful.
Yeah, I thought there were some good KPIs and commentary in here that we could utilise internally to assess our performance, and you can always look at how they do this and focus on the areas that's going to give you a better rating when I don't think that matters too much for council, but I did think you pay your money, let's use the reports in full for what we can extract from them rather than just going, great job, and it was, by the way, great job, but let's use it and get value for the money.
Their fiscal disciplines and what changes the ratings, my reading from these over the years, is exactly what we need to have in mind when we do it. So there's almost a sense we need to understand how they work. I'll be honest, don't ask me about DSCR right at the moment, or they're synthetic. I know in principle what they're about. I wouldn't know how to calculate them. I'm not necessarily certain you would, Andrea, but it's worthwhile trying to understand how they calculate them, because actually they are valuable. They're part of the toolkit in trying to work out what is useful, let alone whether our credit rating is going to change. Because bearing in mind that they also take into account what they call the sovereign or the state of the nation, as well as also us as a whole. Okay.
Bruce, I was wondering, was there anything in there or through the process that you disagreed with or thought we might have been better on that?
No, I don't think so, but I was a little bit nervous given the state of, annual report deficits, long-term plan deficits, all the kind of things that, council are worried about when it comes to your prudence and the like, how that would have impacted on our rating. So for it to still be AA- was, from my perspective, quite a surprise.
And stable.
And stable, yeah.
Were there any, I know they referenced a couple of other councils, but were there any results for other councils that you thought, how did they achieve that? Or, glad that wasn't us. Were there any of those?
No, I don't think so.
I think going back to your original question of, what is the mix between the two of them? Because it's not like we've got, a whole lot of them to choose from. There's two, and I'm sure that they regulate themselves around what is required. And then that efficiency aspect that you talked about, depending on their changes within their organisation, having that continuity must mean that there are efficiencies for us and them in understanding the evolution of where we've come to and everything. As you said, you were surprised. But again, you said the state of the union and the state of the nation actually dictates that we're in an environment where we're not the only ones.
It's an influence.
It's an influence, absolutely.
Yeah. But sometimes the relationship that you build up with their team over time, if it comes down to something that they're slightly, not sure about which way I'll go, that relationship can actually be important in just tipping you to retaining something.
I'm not certain.
Risk is changing.
Yeah, I'm not certain that they would do it at Timaru in the sense of how they treat us. I must confess, and I'm thinking of a metro that I chair, and admittedly it was Standard & Poor's, so I need to be careful what I say here. But fortunately, we as a committee were able to meet with the actual raters And I don't know whether they come here, but I would suggest that if they did, it might be valuable, even if it was a video link, we could have a chat with them. It was highly helpful at that committee, and as I stress, it was a metro, and the raters come from, in that case, Australia. They were in town, and we had a chance to meet with them, which actually helps flesh out and understand these sorts of considerations that are inside it. So, Andrea, that's not a must, they must come here, but if they were, tell them we'd put a sausage roll in their hands and
Well,
a cup of tea and the chat.
there's always teams.
That's right. I know it might be useful. So just, yeah, well, I think, well, in that case, I think it would be useful at a right time to do that with them, just to help us to understand more. Actually, it also might even go back to the original point, your point, Michelle. Janice, let's have a good relationship with these guys, not to influence them, but to understand who they are and they can understand us, which would be good to see a risk committee shown interest in their work.
Historically, I have met with the ratings agencies before, just on Zoom, with the CE.
Historically, you have?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, that's great. Okay, that's good. So if we can just go to the resolution then, please, which is that we, as you quite rightly pointed out to me, we note the 24 credit rating and we note the announcement rating action for 2025 from Fitch. And despite a long discussion, we're all very happy. Thank you, Andrea. It's great news. I'll put the motion. Do I have a seconder? I'll move it. Nigel seconded there, Jess. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. I promised to break at 10:20. We've gone there. But just as we do it, I'd just like us to move into PX for one item. It's in relationship to item 10.2, which is our insurance program. And on, I need to find the page. We have the reasons why it should be in public excluded. Help me here, Jess. I saw it before. Can you tell me which page it's on? I'm trying to find it out. Turn it over. Page 13. Sorry, you're quite right. Thank you. Of course you're right. What am I doing here? At the top of page 13, you will see the reasons why it should be taken into PX, which I agree, the commercial activities, and to enable negotiations. There are some matters in here which I think personally are sensitive. So I'm going to move from the chair that we move into PX for this item for 10:30. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Scotty. Is there any discussion on the motion taking this into PX? There being none, I'll put it all those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right, guys, let's We're up to item 6.7, Andrea, which is the debenture trust review on page 78.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This is a receive and note, the audit report from the auditors in regard to the debenture trust audit. So it's a standing annual report that I noticed it was highlighted in the prior section, but it's attached today.
Thank you.
There's nothing of...
Actually, I appreciated your cover note. That's the best explanation I've seen of why we need a debenture trust and actually the audit. So congratulations, Andrea. It stacks up pretty well. So obviously part of our debt position, we need to have it, albeit it's simplified by the fact we have LGFA as our sole provider. I'm going to move. Is there any questions or comments folk would like to raise? No? So I'm going to move the motions that we receive and we note. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Peter. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. That, by the way, will be part of the normal sort of arrangements that we'd expect to see annually with our auditors who provide that limited assurance. So pick that up when we deal with the engagement letter. We're into the sensitive expenditure review. Who's going to take Stephen? Andrea? Who's Andrea? You can't get away, can you?
So once again, this is just a standard quarterly report. These here have looked at the, in this particular case, the credit card transactions. There was mention before about moving to a P-card system. Moving to a P-card system will essentially pre-approve expenditure, and those cards will be prior approval for the expenditure as opposed to a credit card, which is expenditure afterwards. Nothing
Thank you for that.
to note.
Right, do folk have comments? Yes, Peter.
So does P cards come with a specific system where they load everything and can, all their receipts and everything, are copied and put on there and, yep.
So essentially, the essence behind a P card is that you can have it a limit dedicated to a person. You could have one-off cards that once it's spent on that particular transaction, it's cancelled. So for example, software purchases or overseas purchases. You can have cards for specific, transactions. There is a functionality that, you can decide how, who, whatever you would like your process to be behind it. Yes, then that comes with prior approval, receipts, so it follows a whole process. There's a dashboard that sits in the background to monitor all of that kind of stuff, and then it's processed on a monthly basis back into the general ledger.
It sounds incredibly high admin, like it sounds harder than a credit card.
Credit card, there are only a certain number of people that have credit cards. So instead of, walking around and saying, and then it's up to the managers, it's essentially saving on the admin from having to set up a supplier for every single transaction that we might have, which is a bigger admin process than issuing a P card at the beginning of that process. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? The key thing here is these have all gone through formal internal approval procedures. So it's not a question about whether they are valid or not. It's really just a short test for the committee to A, to note, and B, quite frankly, to say, under the sensitive expenditure and the procedures that we've already looked at this morning, do these fit our test, our sort of intuitive test? Are they reasonable? That automatically drives my eye to the right-hand column in the table. I'm comfortable. Do folk have any comments they'd like to make? Okay, that being the case, let's receive the report and we note the expenditure. I'll move that. Do I have a second? Thanks, Scotty. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. You're making more work for us, Stephen. It's good. 16th of June, correct?
Yep.
Which
sorry,
is it? June
yes,
4?
it's the 16th of June.
We've got June 4.
Yep, and then the text is incorrect.
So it should be 16. Okay, brilliant. Any questions?
What I'd like is a little bit of guidance from you guys if there's anything specific you want to see within that workshop. the way I'm thinking of presenting it is we're going to take the next time is confirm the strategic risks in the new system, and then we can present them to you at the meeting, and then we can discuss that and the overall risk appetite. If there's anything else that you'd want to specifically see in that workshop, I don't want to make it too long and onerous, but if there's anything specifically that would be useful for you to have in there as well, that would be good to know now so we can plan accordingly.
I think that you've done this because I've requested it. So, look, perhaps offline we can have a bit of a chat, Stephen, about what goes into that. I think there are a couple of things that we should be looking at specifically. One, it's always good to get together for an annual refresh. Are these big risks really the ones that count for us? And that's always going to be relative to our aims. I think one thing I would be keen to sponsor, probably almost sounds like I'm taking responsibility, I'd like a bit of a closer look at our risk appetite. Already today we've talked about what is our appetite around insurance risk. That isn't well defined, and I know Nicole probably wants that off us pretty well. Actually, it is partly defined in the paper, which was we were balanced, and yet we used the word. I think there are some points around this. Oh, sorry, and the other one, of course, was magic. What actually, we're actually saying we don't have a risk trade-off here for this. We need to have this nailed, sort of type thing. So that's not to say we're correct, as in governance. But risk appetite is a joining of management and governance together on really, is this something we can handle or not? Where does it count? So probably in that area. So look, I think you and I, perhaps offline, Stephen, can come up with a credible plan unless somebody else has got a good point they want to raise. Yes, Janice.
Bruce, what's the attendance at that? Is it
compulsory?
Just committee or is it council?
That's a good question. I think the way we had set it up, the view was it would be committee. With actually me reporting to full council. But I'm open. I mean, it would be one, Stephen, that if all councillors wanted to, I personally wouldn't have any trouble. What I do need is all management there.
We could extend the invite. There's no problem from that point of view.
But I would think out of it still, it would be good from a communication perspective, this committee to council, if there be, even if it's by way of video, I zoom in and smile and say, hey guys, this is where we settle on our work plan. Good.
Sorry, Bruce, I just had one comment. At that workshop, I'm really keen to understand how that risk framework then flows into what we do on a day-to-day basis at council, because quite often, and like if I take this one for example, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but we're saying climate change is our biggest risk, yet we don't reflect that in our annual plan or along to it explicitly. I'm not saying we don't do anything, and so it'd be really good to get that understanding the connection in that workshop.
That's a plan for the next few months with SLT. Actually, is taking all of these and really, really challenging them, because I mean, community engagement is quite a high one as well, and I would quiz whether that's actually at the time when they were initially done, there was a degree of sort of thinking through the worst case scenarios for each one and outcomes. So I don't know if we need to moderate that in some manner, but I think it does need a bit of thinking, because at the moment it is a case of what is the worst possible outcome from these things, and whether that's actually risk management or whether that's just overstating matters is a matter for discussion.
Also a challenge for council in that when we're setting our annual plan and our long-term plan, I don't think we ever look at our risk strategy, and we should be.
You're making that would be music to the Auditor General's ears, Michelle. Not because they take a stance on climate change, but actually, if we have got that as a risk, it should be integrated into our thinking. Yes, no.
SLT have quite a lot of debate on this, particularly those sitting on that matrix up in the top right-hand corner. And there's quite a bit of debate around how do you lower them, and even the fact that something might be almost certain and the outcome, if it's severe, is probably death. And, like drowning at a pool. Someone drowning at a pool sits right up in that right-hand corner. And you've got lifeguards, you've got the whole shooting match, every control you can think about. But, according to this matrix, you can't move it. Whereas others in SLT are saying, actually you can. It shouldn't be there, but because of severe, and because of the likelihood. And I think that's sort of some of the stuff we've got to really think hard about. to say climate change is our number one risk, is it really? You know, again, we've got to really question ourselves about that. Yeah, so...
Interesting, I noticed the insurers talked about the lack of climate data, which is interesting, particularly given the moves in America at the moment. So it sounds like Antarctic research, which is our primary climate change investigation, might be taking a back seat, but it's almost a political statement on my part. Okay, so that's really helpful, Michelle. Appreciate that. So we might have to be a bit careful about that day, to be honest, because we've got a meeting as well. So we probably also need to look at the agenda to cut that down, if I can, so that we can devote a reasonable time to the workshop. So that those are really good questions. And Michelle, what I'd sort of take out of that, and it might be useful, Stephen and Nigel, think through, just even if it's a short 10-minute, what does ELT do around risk management, which is making that live, but also then thinking about what's the interrelationship between that and our planning and work. Okay, that's going to be really good. So the motion is that we note 16 June, and it's definitely 16 June, not 4. I'll move. Are you going to second, Nigel? Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. As we discussed before, no urgent business. Nothing's come up of that or a minor nature, Nigel? No? Good. Can we now go back to the, what is it we've got here, Jess? You're helping me? I do that, don't I? I do that every meeting. I always try and get fast by jumping over a conflict. Sorry, one paper, and it's one page, page 94. Yep. Sorry, Steve.
I left the most exciting to last. Conflict of interest annual reports is basically just checking in with the procurement team to see how many conflicts of interest of a major or a higher medium rating have been managed over the course of the past year. I didn't want to say nothing to see here, but there was nothing to see here with regards to that level. But I did want to report that 2 low-level ones had actually been managed as per our policy, just to show that we are actively managing it and not ignoring it. Having the procurement specialist at the centre of everything actually does help there, because it means there is a single overarching I'd say it's negative to have a dependency on one person, but the fact there is someone in that role who does oversee all these things makes it a lot easier to report on that perspective. The work between him and the continuous improvement person said that actually the admin and keeping an employee interest register up to date was high compared to its utility, as there wasn't really a check and balance that you could just automatically use it, and it was better just for the amount of procurement we do, just doing it on a rolling case-by-case basis to ensure that we weren't depending on out-of-date information to try and cover ourselves off in that regard. So it was a case of always staying on top of it rather than just accepting information that may be out of date. Any questions? And I'd note that this isn't elected members' conflicts, this is purely staff.
Employee. Yep. Okay, questions for Stephen? No, we're all good?
I would just agree with that point. I think it would be overly onerous, the work that, I mean, it's tough enough for the work that goes into keeping elected members up to date, let alone all employees of the organisation. So as long as it's managed on a case-by-case basis, I think that makes sense.
When a risk is identified, and great that they were managed, where is the decision about the mitigation? Who does that?
It's led by the procurement specialist as part of the procurement process.
Yep.
He's sort of in charge of the chain now. So it is managed by him. If it was at that level of significance, it would be noted and it would be managed in a more, it would be recorded centrally by him, and it would then flow down into this report at the end of the year.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Does it go to, in that case, would the SLT member be made aware?
I mean, the view is that following the policy, they wouldn't be involved in that. procurement process because they'd be conflicted out of it. So
Yeah, yeah.
it would be recorded as part of the reasons they weren't taking part in it.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's minor, sort of saying that it's
Yeah.
known by such and such a person, that's not really. But if it got to that level where it would be touching this report, as I said, I only put the low ones in here because there wasn't anything in the medium high. But if it was getting to that sort of level, it would be recorded, and the person probably wouldn't take part in the negotiations in that regard.
Okay. Radio. The resolution is that we receive the report. I'm going to move in a second. Thank you, Nigel. I'll second that. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Now I'll try and sneak into PX, Jess, if that's okay. No urgent or minor business. So we can move to moving into PX. Each of the reports has the reasons why. I've gone through those. I'm comfortable that they are good. So I will move that we exclude the public, noting that we've already dealt with 10.2. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Nigel. Is there any discussion on the motion? We're all happy these go into PX? Good. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Minutes of the